Hello everyone, it's me Uncle Jam. Today I am going to read S5 5079 Little House on the Prairie. Chapter 2 Pa builds the little house. It was still dark and Pa was packing everything into the wagon. Mary and Laura ate their breakfast in a hurry. When the sun came up, they were driving across the prairie again. There was no road now, so and Patty walked through the tall grass. Before noon, Pa stopped the wagon. Here we are, Caroline, he said. We'll build our house right here. Laura and Mary jumped out. There was nothing around them but grass that reached the edge of the sky. Nearby was a creek. It lay below the prairie, but they could see the dark green treetops. Far away, another line of different greens lay across the prairie. That's the Verdigris River, Pa said to Ma. Then Pa and Ma took everything out of the wagon and put it on the ground. They took the canvas off the wagon and covered all their things. Then Pa took his axe and drove away. Where's Pa going? Laura asked. To get logs from the creeks for our house, Ma said. It was strange and frightening to be without the wagon on the high prairie. The land and the sky seemed too large. Laura felt small. She wanted to hide in the tall grass. Like a prairie chicken, but she didn't. First, she helped Ma make the bed under the canvas cover. Then she went for a walk. She found a mysterious little path in the grass, and she followed it slowly. But suddenly she felt afraid and hurried back to Ma. When Pa returned with the logs, Laura told him about the path. I saw it earlier, he said. It's an old trail, I guess. When will I see a papoose? She asked. I don't know, Laura, Pa replied. You only see Indians when they want you to see them. Day after day, Pa drove to the creek. When he had enough logs, he measured the shape of the house on the ground by walking from side to side and front to back. He dug shallow trenches along two sides, rolled two big logs into them. Then he put two strong logs across the first two to make a square. With his axe, he made a deep, wide cut near the end of each log. The four logs fit together at these cuts. These four strong logs could hold up the new house. All by himself, Pa built the house, 3 logs high. Then Ma helped him, log by log. They built the walls higher while Laura played in the tall grass. One day she heard Pa shout, Caroline, be careful, get out of the way. A big log was falling towards Ma. Pa couldn't stop it. It crashed down and Ma fell to the ground. Laura and Pa ran to Ma. The log was on her foot. Pa lifted it and Pa pulled out her foot. Pa felt the log, nothing was broken. Can you move your arms? He asked. Can you turn your head? Ma moved her arms and turned her head. I'm all right, she whispered. Thank God. Nothing's broken. It's only a bad sprain. Ma's face was gray. But she said bravely, well, a sprain will soon get better. Don't worry, Charles. But Ma's foot didn't get better for some time. The house must wait, said Pa. Then one afternoon, Pa came up the creek road singing. Good news, he said. We have a neighbor only 3 kilometers away on the other side of the creek. I met him while I was hunting. He's going to help me finish our house. Then I'll go over and help him with his house. Early the next morning, Mr. Edwards arrived. He was tall and wore old clothes, but he was very polite to Ma. He was a fast worker, and one day he and Pa finished the wall. They laughed and sang while they worked, and the axes made the wood fly. They cut holes for a door and 2 windows, and soon the house was finished except for the roof and floor. Laura ran inside the new house, smelled sweetly of cut wood, prairie grass. The sun shone through the window hole and fell across Laura's hand and her arms and her feet. The walls were thick and the house felt large and strong. Ma had cooked a good supper, and she and Pa invited Mr. Edwards to stay. There was rabbit and hot cornbread with pork and even coffee with real sugar. Then Pa took out his fiddle. Mr. Edwards lay on the ground near the fire to listen as Pa played Laura and Mary's favorite song, I'm a Gypsy King. Pa's voice was deeper than an old frog's. Laura couldn't stop laughing. Then Mr. Edwards jumped up and began to dance wildly in the moonlight. Pa played song after song while Mr. Edwards danced. Laura's and Mary's hands were clapping and the feet were moving with the music too. And baby Carrie, who had woken up, was singing in Ma's arms, clapping her little hands and laughing. When it was time for Mr. Edwards to go, he took his gun and said goodnight. Pop played one last song as Mr. Edwards walked away into the darkness, singing happily. When the song ended, the prairie was silent. Only the wind whispered in the tall grass. The walls are up, Pa said to Ma the next morning. Let's move in. I heard wolves everywhere around us last night. We should have strong, thick walls around us. Make the floor and roof later because I must build a stable for Pat and Patty as fast as I can. They should be safe inside walls too. Why haven't we seen any Indians? Ma asked. I don't know. I've seen the places where they camp. They were away hunting for food now, I guess. After breakfast, Pa got on top of the walls to put the canvas wagon cover over the house. Canvas blew wildly in the wind, so did Pa's hair. Once it almost flew away into the air like a big bird, but he finally tied the canvas down. By dinner time, the house was ready. The beds were made on the floor. Short logs had become chairs. Pa's gun was up in its place over the door. It was a pleasant house. Before winter comes, I'll make a wood floor and a solid roof, Pa said, but then must wait until I finish helping Mr. Edwards and building a stable. We're going to do well here, Caroline. We'll be happy here for the rest of our lives. Laura liked the place too. She liked the great big sky, the winds, and the wide land. Everything was so clean and big and wonderful. Inside the thick walls of the new home, they felt warm and safe. Pa put up a quilt over the door hole. As she fell asleep that night, Laura heard the wolves cry from somewhere far away on the prairie. She did not feel so frightened. Chapter 3. Wolves frightened the family. Pa and Mr. Edwards built a stable for Pat and Perry in one day. By the time they put the roof on, it was dark. Now, said Pa, let those wolves howl. I'll sleep tonight. In the morning, when Laura went into the stable, she found a surprise waiting for her. A little colt with long ears stood beside Pat. When Laura went toward it, the gentle Pat put back her ears and showed her teeth. Stay back, Laura, Pa shouted. She could bite you. Then he said to Pat, you know, we won't hurt your baby, Pat. Pat let Pa touch the baby, but she didn't let Laura or Maddie go near her. Early that afternoon, the Pa rode Patty across the prairie to see what he could see. There was plenty of meat in the house, so he did not take his gun. By late afternoon, he still hadn't come home. Ma and Laura began to get supper ready outside by the fire. Maddie was in the house, taking care of the baby. Laura asked Ma, what's the matter with Jack? Jack was walking up and down and around the house, looking worried. His hair stood up on his neck. The Pat started running around in circles. Ma looked around at the wide prairie and the sky, but didn't see anything unusual. It's probably nothing at all, Laura, Ma said. She made the coffee. The prairie chicken that was cooking on the fire began to smell good. But all the time, Ma went on looking around. Suddenly, Patty came running fast across the prairie. Pa was almost flat, holding on to her neck. Patty ran past the stable before Pa could stop her. She was trembling, and her black coat was hot and wet. Pa was hot and tired, too. Hey, what's the matter, Charles? Ma asked him. Pa's eyes were looking toward the creek, so Ma and Laura looked at it, too. They only saw grass and trees. What is it? Ma asked again. Why were you riding Patty so fast? I was afraid the wolves had come here. Wolves? Ma cried. What wolves? Everything is fine now, Caroline, said Pa. Let me rest a minute. Then he said, we saw 50 of them, Caroline. They were the biggest wolves I have ever seen. It was terrible. Supper was ready. Mary and Laura stayed close to the fire and kept baby Carrie with them. They could feel the darkness everywhere. They didn't stop looking around. Shadows moved on the prairie. Jack did not growl, but his ears were lifted, listening to the darkness. The girls ate their chicken as they listened to Pa telling Ma about the wolves. He had found some more neighbors. Settlers were coming in and building houses along both sides of the creek. Not far away, a man and his wife were building a house. The name the name was Scott, and Pa said they were nice people. As he was riding home across the prairie, a pack of wolves came out of nowhere. They were all around Pa in a moment. It was a big pack, Pa said. There were 50 wolves, and the biggest wolves I ever saw in my life. The leader was a meter tall. I tell you, my hair stood straight up. And you didn't have your guns? I know, but to be honest, I didn't miss it. You can't fight 50 wolves with one gun. What did you do? Ma asked. Nothing. The Betty tried to run, but I pulled the reins hard and made her walk. Wolves will chase and hurt the running horse. How awful, Charles, Ma said quietly. Yeah, it was, said Pa. Those wolves just walked along with us like a pack of dogs going along with the horse. They were all around us, jumping and playing with each other, just like dogs. We're lucky they weren't hungry. Laura's mouth and eyes were wide open. Her heart was beating fast. Patty was trembling all over. Pa said she was so scared. I was too. But I made her walk. When we got near the creek, the leader turned down toward the creek, and the rest of the pack followed him. That's when I let Patty go. I was scared the whole way home. I thought the wolves might come this way. I knew you could keep the wolves out of the house with the gun, but the pet and her colt were outside. I guess I could save our horses, Charles, I said. I know, said Pa. I wasn't thinking straight, but the wolves are far from here by now, and all is well that ends well. All's well that ends well. Jack was walking around the campfire. When he stopped to smell the air, the hair lifted on his neck. It's time for bed, girls. Ma said she took them all into the house, but it took Laura a long time to fall asleep. Suddenly she was sitting straight up in bed. She had been asleep. Light from the moon was coming through the window and the cracks in the wall. Pa was standing there with his gun. Suddenly, a wolf howled right in Laura's ear. She pulled away from the wall. The wolf was just on the other side of it. Laura was too scared to speak. Then many wolves started howling all around the house, and Laura got out of bed. Pa turned his head and saw her standing there. Do you want to see them, Laura? He asked softly. Without saying anything, Laura walked over to Pa. He put down his gun and lifted her up to the window. There, in the light of the moon, sat half circles of wolves. They looked at Laura, and she looked at them. The biggest one was taller than Laura. His coat was gray, and his eyes were shining and green. Laura looked and looked at the wolf. He's awfully big. Laura said into Pa's ear. Yes, and see how his coat shines. Pa said into her hair. They in a circle around the house. Laura went with him to the other window. She saw the other half of the circle of wolves. The big wolf lifted his nose to the sky and howled. All the other wolves answered him. The noise filled the wide prairie. Now go back to bed, Laura, Pa said. Go to sleep. Jack and I will take care of you all. So Laura went back to bed. She heard the wolves howling and trying to smell them through the cracks in the walls of the house. It was a long time before she fell asleep. Chapter 4. Oh! Pa finishes the house. When Laura woke up the next morning, the warm sun was on her face. She ran outdoors. Mary was talking to Ma by the fire. There were no wolves anywhere. Pa came up the creek road with his gun in hand. He had made sure that the wolves were gone. They all sat by the fire and ate their breakfast. I'll make a door today, Pa said. I want more than a quilt between us and the wolves next time. After breakfast, Pa took the horses and his axe, went to get wood for the door. Mary watched, but Laura helped Pa to make the door. She gave him his saw, which he used to cut the logs at the ends. With his axe, he made a nice straight boards from the logs. He laid the long boards on the ground and fastened some shorter boards across them. That made the door. Then Pa made a door frame and put hinges on the door to make it open and close. While he put the door in place, Laura stood against it to hold it up. Pa fastened the hinges to the frame. When the door was finished, it was beautiful and strong. Now we're all safe, said Pa, and I had a fine little helper. He put his hand gently on Laura's head. The sun was going down, the wind was cooler, and supper was cooking on the fire. It was a salt pork, which made the best supper smell that Laura had ever smelled. Then I passed that to Ma. Now, Caroline, I'm going to build you a fireplace. You can do your cooking inside the house. I've never seen such a sunny place as this, but I suppose that one of these days the rains will come. Yes, Charles. Good weather always comes to an end sooner or later. So Pa was soon cutting away the grass just outside the wall of the house, where he was going to build a fireplace. Then he climbed into the wagon. He looked down at Laura. She was looking up at him. Do you want to go along, Laura? You and Mary? Pa said that they could. The girls climbed up and sat on the high seat beside Pa. Pat and Prairie started with a little jump and pulled the wagon down the new road. The path wagon wheels had begun to make. They rode through dry valleys and over low round hills. Forest covered some of these hills, but some of them were open and grassy. Deer were lying under the trees or standing and eating grass in the sun. They lifted their heads and watched the wagon with their large, soft eyes. The birds sang and rabbits jumped out of the way of the wagon. When they arrived at the creek, Pa said, "You girls can play, but don't go too far into the water." So Laura and Mary played by the creek, while Pa dug the big rocks that he needed for the fireplace. When the wagon was full, they rode on to the high prairie, where the wind was blowing and the grass was singing. Laura decided she liked the high prairie best. It was so wide and sweet and clean. That afternoon, the family watched Pa build a fireplace. First, he had cleared grass in a square outside the house wall. Now he put a row of rocks around the square. Next, he mixed earth and water, the beautiful thick mud. He put some mud over the rocks. In the mud, he put another row of rocks. With rocks and mud and more rocks and more mud, Pa built the fireplace and chimney as high as the house wall. Then he used the wood and mud to finish the top of the chimney. Finally, he went into the house, and with his axe and saw, he cut a hole in the wall. And there was the fireplace. The whole family stood and admired it. Ma carefully built a little fire in the new fireplace and cooked the prairie chicken for supper. And that evening, they ate in their house. The chicken tasted so good in Laura's mouth. Her hands and face were washed and her hair was brushed. She sat up straight on her log chair and used a knife and fork nicely. As Ma had taught her, she did not say anything because children mustn't speak at the table until they are spoken to. But she looked at Pa and Ma and Mary and baby Carrie. She felt happy. It was nice to be in a house again. All day long, every day, Laura and Maddie were busy. When the dishes were washed and the beds were made, there was always plenty to do and to see. In the tall grass, they looked for birds and watched baby prairie chickens running to their mothers. They watched snakes lying still in the sun, moving fast through the prairie. All the time, of course, either Laura or Mary was taking care of baby Carrie. Sometimes Laura forgot to be quiet when baby Carrie was sleeping. She ran around and shouted until Ma came to the door and said, Laura, dear, must you shout like an Indian? In fact, you girls are getting as brown as Indians in the sun. Why can't you learn to keep your hats on? Pa, when are we going to see our papoose? Laura asked. Pa was up on the house wall, beginning to put on the roof. What do you want to see an Indian baby? Ma said, surprised. Put on your hat and forget your crazy idea. But Laura did not forget the papoose. That was Indian country, and she wanted to see Indians. She knew that she should see them sometime, but she was tired of waiting. Pa had taken the canvas off the top of the house. For days, he had been getting logs from the creeks and cutting them into long, thin boards. The boards were lying all around the house. Now Pa reached down and pulled up a board. He put it across the rafters. Then he began to nail the board to the rafters. Pa pulled up and nailed down more boards all the way to the top of the rafters. The roof was done. The rain would never get in. Then Pa made a floor with beautiful hard wood. You've done a wonderful job, Charles, Ma said. They were all happy that night. The sky was full of stars. Pa sat for a long time by the open door and played his fiddle and sang to his family in the house and to the stairs outside. Later, Pa dug a well with Mr. Scott's help, and they didn't need to fetch muddy water from the creek anymore. Now, after that, he went to town to get glass to put in the windows. Then the house was truly finished. Chapter 5 Indians. Early one morning, Pa took his gun and went hunting. Jack wanted to go too, but Pa tied him to the stable. No, Jack, Pa said, you must stay here and take care of the family. Then he said to Mary and Laura, don't untie him, girls. But Jack lay down. Mary and Laura stayed by the stable all morning and tried to play with him, but he was miserable. Jack's head was on Laura's leg, and she was talking to him when he suddenly stood up and growled. The hair on his neck stood straight up, and his eyes stared, red and angry. Laura was afraid. Jack had never growled at her before. Then she looked over her shoulder where Jack was looking, and she saw two wild men, one behind, the other coming close on the Indian trail. Mary, look, she shouted. Mary looked and saw them too. They were tall, thin, fierce-looking men. Their skin was reddish-brown. Their eyes were black and shining. There were feathers on their heads. Indians, then Mary whispered. Laura suddenly felt cold. Her legs trembled. Jack growled angrily. The Indians came close and closer. Then Mary and Laura watched them walk right into the house. Jack was growling, jumping and trying to break free. Jack's here, Laura whispered to Mary. We'll be safe if we stay close to him, but they are in the house. They're in the house with Ma and Carrie. Then Laura began to shake all over. She knew she must do something. What were the Indians doing to Ma and baby Cherry? There was no sound from the house. Oh, what are they doing to Ma? Laura screamed in a whisper. Oh, I don't know, Mary whispered. I'm going to untie Jack. Laura whispered, he'll kill them. Pa told us not to do that. He didn't know Indians would come. He said not to untie Jack. Mary was almost crying. Laura thought of little baby Carrie and Ma. They're in the house with those Indians. I'm going in to help Ma, she said. She ran 2 steps and then turned and flew back to Jack. She hid her face against his neck. We mustn't leave Ma in there alone, Mary whispered. She stood still and trembled. Laura made herself leave Jack. She shut her eyes and ran towards the house. As fast as she could, she fell down and her eyes opened. She got up again and started running. Mary was right behind her. They came to the door. It was open. They entered the house without a sound. The naked wild man stood by the fireplace. Ma was cooking something over the fire, while baby Carrie hid her face in Ma's dress. Loretta Laura ran towards Ma, but as she reached the Indians, she smelled something awful. She looked up at the Indians and went to hide behind the table. With one eye, she looked out at the wild man. First, she saw the moccasins on their feet, then their thin red-brown legs, all the way up. Around their waist, each Indian wore the skin of a small animal. The skin was black and white. Now, Laura knew what had made that smell. The skins were made from the fresh skunks. There was a knife and a small axe in each skin. Their faces were very calm and very fierce. These wild men had no hair around their ears, where hair usually grows. There was hair only at the very top of their heads. They had put feathers in it. When Laura looked out from behind the table, both Indians were looking straight at her. Her heart jumped. The Indian did not move, only their eyes shone. Laura did not move either. And the Indian made a short sound like a ha. Laura hid again beyond the table. She heard them sitting down on the floor. She heard Ma giving them cornbread, and she heard them eating it. And Laura looked again. She saw they had eaten every bit of the cornbread. Then the Indians got up. They looked at Ma, made deep noises in their throat, and walked out the door. Their feet made no sound at all. Ma sat down on the bed. She looked sick. She put her arms around Laura and Mary. Do you feel sick? No, I'm just thankful they're gone. And Pa arrived home with a big rabbit and 2 Prairie chickens. He put his gun up in its place over the door. Laura and Mary threw their arms around him, both talking at the same time. What's all this? He said, Indians? So you've seen Indians at last, have you, Laura? I noticed they have a camp in the valley west of here. Did Indians come into the house, Caroline? Yes, Charles, 2 of them. I'm sorry, but they took all your tobacco and ate a lot of cornbread. I just gave them what they wanted. Oh, Charles, I was afraid. You did the right thing. We don't want to make enemies of the Indian. Then he said, what a smell. They wore fresh skunk skins out around their waist, said Ma. And that was all they wore. Later, when Laura and Mary were helping Pa clean the prairie chicken, Laura said, I wanted to untie Jack to those Indians. Pa laid down his knife and asked in a terrible voice, did you girls even think of untying Jack? Laura dropped her head and whispered, yes. After I told you not to, Pa said in a more terrible voice, yes, Pa. For a moment, Pa was silent. After this, you girls must do as I say. You must always obey me. Do you hear? Yes, Pa, Laura and Mary whispered. If the Indians come again and Jack is untied, he'll bite them, and then there will be trouble, bad trouble. Do you understand? Yes, Pa, the girls said, but they did not understand. Do as you are told, said Pa, and you will be safe. One day Pa said that the Indians had left the little camp on the prairie. Do you want to see it? He asked Laura. Mary, when the girls jumped up and down with excitement, Pa said, come on then, let's go. The ground was hard under their feet. They went farther and farther into the big prairie. At last, they went down into the little valley where the Indians had camped. Laura and Mary looked around. There was small animals, flowers, and trees. It was a beautiful secret place. Pa, are there other Indian camps on the prairie? Yes, Laura, he answered. Are there Indians in them? I don't know, said Pa, perhaps. She held one of his hands and Mary held the other. And together they looked at the Indians' camp. There were old campfire. They could see where Indian horses had eaten the grass, where big and small moccasins had walked, and where Indians had cooked and eaten. Suddenly Laura shouted, look, look, something bright blue was shining on the ground. She picked it up. It was a beautiful blue bead. Laura shouted with excitement. Mary saw a red bead, and Laura saw a great one. They forgot everything except bees. They found white bees and brown bees, more and more red and blue bees. All that afternoon they looked for bees. When they had finished, the sun was going down. Laura had a handful of bees, and so did Mary. Pop put them carefully in his pocket. They all went home together. Supper was cooking on the fire when they arrived. Baby Carrie was playing on the floor. Sorry we are late, said Pa. Then he took the bees out of his pocket and showed them to Pa. But look what the girls found. Oh, they are beautiful, Ma said with a smile. Laura thought the bees looked even prettier than before. She touched the bees with a finger and watch them shine. Though these are mine, she said. Then Mary said, Carrie, can I have mine? Ma waited for Laura to speak. But Laura didn't want to say anything. She felt all hot inside and wished that Mary wasn't always such a good girl, but she couldn't let Mary be better than she was. So she said slowly, Carrie, can I have mine too? You are good little girls, Ma said. She put Mary's bead into Mary's hand, Laura's into Laura's hand, and she said, you can make a pretty necklace for Carrie to wear around her neck. Mary and Laura sat side by side on their bed and made Carrie's necklace. They didn't say anything. Perhaps Mary felt sweet and good inside, but Laura didn't. When she looked at Mary, she wanted to hit her, so she didn't look at her again. The beads made a beautiful necklace. Carrie laughed when she saw it. The Ma tied it around Carrie's little neck. Laura felt a little bit better. It looked so pretty on her. But when Carrie felt the beads on her neck, she tried to break the necklace. So Ma untied it and put it away. Carrie can wear it when she's older, Ma said. Laura still wanted those pretty beads for herself. But she knew it had been a wonderful day. She knew she was never going to forget the Indian camp. The end.